On today's show, it appears that Kevin Durant will be staying with the Brooklyn Nets, at least for the foreseeable future. What does that mean for the Brooklyn Nets picks that the Houston Rockets currently own? Is this a good thing or a bad thing that KD is actually going to stick it out with the Nets, at least for this upcoming season? We're going to break down all of that and more, as well as some news and notes from around the NBA coming up on today's Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start.
The Houston Rockets select Jalen Green and Jabari Smith Jr.
T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal.
Every time I step on that floor, I'm coming.
You're getting somebody who's going to come in with a chip on their shoulder, somebody who's going to come in and compete from day one.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast, home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian, a credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Mondays, host of the State of the Rockets podcast, as well as the founder of ClutchCityControlRoom.com. Be sure to follow along on Twitter at JT Gatlin. The show, of course, at Locked On Rockets. We are free and available on all podcast platforms. That's Apple, Spotify, Google, Odyssey, wherever you get your podcasts. You can find this podcast. You can also check us out on YouTube. Go to YouTube, search Locked On Rockets. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Now, for today's show, we're going to focus heavily on the news coming out last week that Kevin Durant and apparently the rest of the Nets brain trust owner Joe Tsai, GM Sean Marks, head coach Steve Nash sat down. They had a big powwow, and they decided that it's in everybody's best interest to move forward together under the, idea, right, that they want to bring a championship back to Brooklyn. Now, what does this mean for the Houston Rockets? We're going to explore that thoroughly here in segment one. Segment two, we'll be joined by Doug Norrie from Locked On Nets to take a look at what this means for the Nets moving forward, to try and get a glimpse, kind of behind the curtain as to what this could mean for the Nets organization, again, as it relates back to the Houston Rockets and the Brooklyn Nets picks that the Rockets own for the next half decade or so. And then lastly, in segment three, we'll kind of tackle some news and notes from around the rest of the association. Patrick Beverley, now a member of the LA Lakers, with another former Houston Rocket, Russell Westbrook, what that's going to look like. Chet Holmgren's unfortunate injury, going to miss his entire rookie campaign. A couple other things we'll get to there in segment three. But starting with the KD news, right? I'm still not sure if this is a good thing or a bad thing for the Houston Rockets, right? We've done some episodes. We've talked about some of the possibilities for the Rockets to maybe get involved as a third-team dealer for Kevin Durant to try and grease the wheels using some of those Brooklyn Nets picks. And as it stands right now, I still believe the Rockets benefit heavily from any level of uncertainty within that Brooklyn Nets franchise, right? The more uncertainty there is about the future with Kevin Durant, the future with Kyrie Irving, whether or not the Nets are going to be able to be competitive, it does benefit the Rockets ultimately. However, if KD had been dealt, then there would be a little bit more certainty in the direction of that franchise. Right now, there's still a lot of uncertainty, right? Can this Nets team put it together? Can they be a championship contender? Can they get KD and Ben Simmons and Kyrie to all buy in? And can the role players play well enough to make this team, a top team coming out of the Eastern Conference? A lot of question marks. And those question marks, to me, play more in favor of the Rockets. It's almost like this situation now has, at least for the Rockets' sake, has the potential to be the absolute best case scenario for the Rockets, where it still blows up spectacularly in Brooklyn's face, and then the Rockets reap the huge benefits from that, or it works out to where KD, Kyrie, and Ben Simmons realize that they have a ton of potential together, that they could be, the favorite coming out of the Eastern Conference, and then those picks go back to being, late firsts, if you're the Houston Rockets, which is exactly what they were back when James Harden was originally dealt. So then the Rockets are kind of back at square one, right? Where those picks are not going to be super juicy, not great, still late first. You still like having them, but they're not going to be lottery bound. There's not going to be chances for, adding tons of lottery talent in the midst of, Kevin Durant leaving the Brooklyn Nets franchise high and dry. However, if KD had gone through with his trade request, if the Nets had managed to deal KD and gotten back some semblance of a package like one centered around Jalen Brown, right? A young prospect, an all-star caliber talent, as well as an influx of draft picks from another organization, then the Nets would have been in a better position to kind of be in the middle tier of the outcomes for the Houston Rockets, right? To where maybe they're not favorites coming out of the East, but they're at least competitive and they're in the playoff hunt, which would mean those picks would probably be falling somewhere in the late teens, early 20s. And that kind of middle of the pack outcome is still better for the Rockets than the outcome in which KD, Ben Simmons, and Kyrie Irving realize their maximum potential and become a championship contender overnight. But it's still not as good as the perfect outcome, which is, again, having this all explode in Brooklyn's face spectacularly. And that's where we're at right now. With the fact that KD has decided to at least run it back this season, it feels like things could still go haywire at any moment, right? Maybe they get into the season and it's, a month into the season, KD decides to mentally check out, or Kyrie Irving starts to, go off the reservation again, or maybe Ben Simmons just isn't the same as he used to be, or, just, I don't know, can't get it back together on a basketball court. There's a lot of different ways that this could still go wrong for Brooklyn. And in the event that it does, the Rockets are still in the fortuitous position that they own the swap rights to this year's pick for Brooklyn. But even better than that is the following year, in which the Rockets own the Brooklyn Nets pick complete and outright. Because if the Nets manage to get through this year, and if they hold on to KD past the trade deadline, and if this entire situation, if this entire KD saga just gets rolled over into next summer, then that could be the summer where Brooklyn decides to formally, truly blow it all up. They've got Kyrie Irving on a one-year deal for this season, and that's it. So Kyrie could walk next summer completely. KD could be dealt next summer. Who knows what happens with Ben Simmons? And the Nets are in a position where if the big three doesn't work out, if their current big three doesn't work out, then they go off and they sell off all the other parts, all the other role players, to other organizations trying to get back whatever assets they can. The Rockets could be in a great position owning their 2024 pick outright, because if that's the year that the Nets completely bottom out, the Rockets owning that pick is absolute best case scenario. So the way that I see it right now is this scenario has the chance to be both the best possible outcome for the Rockets and the subsequent worst possible outcome for the Rockets if that big three in Brooklyn realize how lethal they can really be together on the floor. And then subsequently, again, if it doesn't work out, then the Rockets are in a great position to have a couple of great draft assets. Again, this next year with the swap is kind of whatever, because Houston's probably going to be maybe not the worst team in the association again, but at least maybe a bottom 5 team, give or take. And so the chances of the Rockets effectively being able to swap their pick for the Brooklyn pick, slim to none, unless things blow up spectacularly in Brooklyn this season. But I don't really expect that to happen, at least at this point. So it's that 2024 pick that I'm keeping my eyes on and that you should be keeping your eyes on as well. Now, coming up, we're going to hear from Doug Norrie from Locked On Nets to take a look at what this whole situation means for the Brooklyn Nets moving forward, to get kind of a better idea, a better idea of what this means for the Brooklyn Nets team from a Brooklyn perspective. We're going to get there in just a moment after a quick message from our friends over at NHTSA. Because look, are you one of those people that thinks it's okay to drive around while high? Well, it's the worst that can happen, right? Maybe you're driving a little bit below the posted speed limit. It's no big deal, right? Absolutely wrong. The truth is, reaction times slow way, way down when you're high. You not only put yourself in danger, you put everyone around you in danger. Talk about a buzzkill. Stop kidding yourself. It's not okay to drive high. If you've been using marijuana in any form, do not get behind the wheel of a car. If you feel different, you drive different. Drive high, get a DUI. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Let's go ahead and dive into our chat with Locked On Nets host Doug Norrie to get a better idea from the Brooklyn perspective of what this KD news actually means. Joining us now is Doug Norrie from Locked On Nets. You can follow on Twitter at Doug Norrie. Now, Doug, Kevin Durant and the Nets apparently agreeing to move forward together with one collective goal in mind of bringing an NBA championship to Brooklyn. Now, however, tenuous this relationship feels at this current point in time after everything that's been going on the last, couple months, the entire offseason, it pretty much feels like. Does this feel like almost a begrudging agreement or more so of a turning point in which KD has realized that Brooklyn might, actually be the best situation for him moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I probably is somewhat begrudging. I mean, it's not what he had stated he wanted. Nothing else seemed to have changed on the Nets end of things. So at that point, unless there was some kind of misunderstanding, which you usually don't get to, when it comes to trade requests, short of that, the Nets didn't change their stance at all. They didn't fire the coach. They didn't fire the GM. They didn't make any player personnel movement. They didn't sign Kyrie. I mean, none of that stuff that you would have thought would have been a needle mover for Durant happened. And at least for now, they got into a room and said, this is the best way forward. Look, you're allowed to change your mind about things. I think we live in a society where it's like, if you change your mind, it looks like you're a flip-flopper or it looks like you're weak or anything like that. You're allowed to, at some point, just say, hey, turns out that this might be the best path forward. I don't think that's an ethical or moral indictment of somebody, although it's been framed that way, I think. So I think is it begrudging? I'm sure at some point, but it also just could have been the best option because, when it got down to when rubber met the road on some of these trade demands, what really materialized? Not much. That can be a little humbling too. And so I don't know, who knows what happened in this room? I'm sure it wasn't all just like a peace circle with everyone holding hands and doing a lap around the campfire. But these guys are professionals. They've all been in this business and the industry for a long time. And sometimes this is just the way it plays out. And I think that's where we are. So I think it's somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, and I kind of fully agree with you, right? When presented with new facts, new information, it's totally fine, right? You make a new, more informed decision as to where you were before. And even though it may, maybe there's not a whole ton of new information, maybe just some new perspective kind of on the situation for KD, at least as far as his decision to kind of move forward with the Nets and, rescind his previous trade request. I mean, we'll see how it plays out. But when you look at, obviously we still need to see what this Nets team actually looks like on the floor, whether they can actually kind of piece this whole thing together. But at this point, how much credit should Sean Marks and Joe Tsai get for kind of navigating this situation and not completely caving to KD's demands earlier on?
Yeah, you have to get a ton of credit based on what happened. Right now, on the one hand, you could say, well, maybe that was some of their own creation. So then you have to walk back some of the credit. If you think that some of the blame for Durant asking out falls into their laps, which I think some of it does, at least from the GM standpoint. I think there's a number of missteps and moves that kind of went wrong for the Nets here over the last couple of years. So from that point, it's hard to get credit for maybe, getting back something that you created. Now, that being said, once the trade demand is made and you get out of it without making a trade, you have to get credit for that. That is there. And I think to some degree that path was forged a little bit by Daryl Morey last year with Ben Simmons. They have something of a template to say, hey, when a guy asks out, you're not obligated to just ship him out to the first person that offers a big contract or a big trade package or a trade package too. So I think Morey helped a little bit with that he stood firm on the Simmons thing for basically looked like he was going to go, he would have gone through the deadline. I think he would have stood up for the whole year on the Simmons piece. So I think that helped them. Yeah. And I think, when you have Kevin Durant here, you have to just try everything in your power to keep him around, to get him happy. I think that, and if you're able to walk back a trade demand, especially a trade demand that looks like it was tied directly to you and to maybe the coach, and to have none of it changed, you have to compliment someone on being able to do that. That is not an easy needle to thread. They somehow figured it out. And you do get credit for it. I can't give full credit because I do think they were part of the problem to begin with. And I think Durant maybe was part of the problem too, right? I don't think no one here is coming out completely unscathed. And I think probably that maybe more than anything is probably what informed their decision. It's hey, we all kind of don't look great in this. So maybe we can all just come together and come out of this looking better. And the best way for us to look better is just to come back, play with the team we have, which could be absolutely stacked, and move on. And because I think it was becoming increasingly clear that anything else was just maybe that's not going to happen.
Yeah, right. Just get everybody together and say, hey, we can maybe salvage this a little bit, right? Like there's going to be some, some tough pills to swallow as far as just what this is kind of looking like, what people are going to be able to look back on, how this offseason transpired. But still, that is important that they were able to kind of come together to that decision, at least at this point. And the timing of this decision, right, Doug? Like, I mean, how important was it to just come to this conclusion, right? To iron this out before training camp, before the season started, right? Because this could have gone one of two ways, right? This could have dragged on throughout training camp, possibly into the early part of the season. And at least at this stage, right, this gives the Nets the best chance to actually try to run this thing back with KD and prove, hey, like, we are still a good situation for you.
Yeah, look, I think when you look at how the decision tree or the if statements were kind of branching out here the longer it went on, the worse it was also going to be for everybody, right? Because, and this goes back to how long are we going to play this out for? Or we're all in a weird spot. The trade packages that are coming back for you presumably aren't even close, right? So because we never heard about, short of the Jalen Brown offer, we never heard of anything else really formal around what a team offered. So, and they can just present that to KD and say, hey, these were the packages. We can't accept this for you. You have 4 more years in the contract. You're Kevin Durant. It's just not reasonable to accept. So they can actually present maybe real world thing. And these guys all know too, like the agents and everything. I know that front offices talk. These agents are usually as part of the process as anybody else, right? Because that's just the way the NBA ecosystem works at this point. So you have with all the information on the table, the trade packages aren't good enough. Now, that being said, what are we going to do? Are we going to get all the way to training camp? You are going to come back to a team you don't want to play for? That doesn't look great. How can we put you on the court? Like if you don't want to be on the team. So that, in Kevin Durant's eyes, that can start looking bad too. And on the Nets' point of view, it's like, hey, we're going to have an unhappy guy. We can't make any more roster moves. We can't do anything. We're all just stuck. The theme for this whole summer, basically from the time that Durant put in the trade request, which was just stuck. No one could move. The Nets could not make any other roster moves. The Nets could not move forward and try to plan it all. Durant has to just not know which team he's on. And if it's never looking like it's going to get close, what changes that between now and training camp? Nothing. These teams, if anything, I think maybe what happened was, hey, we're not helping each other at all here. I don't think this is over. Like, I don't think Kevin Durant is here for 4 more years. I would not make a life bet on that at all. I think probably something that was said was, let's go into the season. Let's walk down this hallway all together, look like we're all together. And let's evaluate as the season goes up to the trade deadline. You play your hardest. You might find out that this team's very good and you want to keep playing. It could all implode. And at that point, we'll just revisit the trade at the deadline. But we can't do that. We can't do that from a point of strength unless it looks like we're all trying now. I think if anything, that's probably what was said. Is like, hey, let's just all give each other another shot. You're free to just ask for a trade again. You already did it once. Like, you can do it again. I can see that more than anything have been the scenario, because what else could, they're just, like I said, everyone was just stuck. And then the way that the pattern was kind of unfolding, there was going to be no change. And this looked like might have been the only way.
Yeah, and if you've got KD sitting out for, a chunk of the beginning of the season, then, the trade leverage just goes even further and further down. And then suddenly, again, neither side is getting what they want. KD is still in Brooklyn. No possible trade packages are coming forward. Yeah, it's a lose-lose situation. At least this way, it looks like a potential win-win situation if there is still a split, pending further down the line. But Doug, in all of this, right? Again, KD, headlines everywhere, all KD. There's still one other pretty sizable domino to try and figure out moving forward for this Nets team, and that's what happens with Kyrie Irving, right? The Nets declined to extend him to begin the offseason. That was one of KD's whole, demands, things that, kind of everybody thought was going to happen to make KD happy. That didn't happen. I mean, are the Nets just kind of expecting Kyrie to just show back up to work and play his heart out? Or is that kind of the next, okay, finally, KD's situation taken care of, and then they turn their attention, they're like, all right, what do we got to do with Kyrie now?
Well, in the Nets' favor here, they've done all the right things, quote unquote, with Kyrie in this offseason. He's been a big part of their promotional stuff. Like, he's had, there's no controversy around him. His stuff is usually not of the typical NBA controversy stuff. It's usually just kind of out of left field things, but there's been nothing even like that. It's been, if you follow Nets sort of just the social media stuff, it's been a lot of Kyrie centric stuff. He does a lot of camps. He does a lot of stuff over the summer. And they have highlighted a lot of that. And so, from that point of view, that relationship for a 1-year relationship, because it hasn't been re-signed at this point, looks pretty good. The Nets also needed to market something, because with Durant unsure, someone's got to go on the court that people want to buy tickets for. And Kyrie Irving, when he plays, is definitely one of those dudes. So I think from the Nets perspective, all that stuff has been pretty positive. It doesn't make sense to have it go any other way. His stance, it seems very positive right now. Like, this relationship looks like they might be somewhat on the same page about, and it's funny, like, it's all about sort of like value, just getting the value back to where it should be, right? Like, Kyrie Irving's value has clearly declined a little bit here based on other things. The way to get that back up is to have everyone kind of looking like they're on the same page and playing well. Like, I think even no matter what you think of Kyrie, that is a very clear thing that needs to happen. And I think that has been happening for him. And so I think that, I don't know if this means they're going to see a long-term contract come down the door. This could have been, or come down the pike. I think this could have also been something that was discussed and said, hey, he's part of our future now. We just got to come to the agreement on the terms. Like, who knows? But I think right now, another theme for the Nets is, let's all have it appear as if it's on the up and up. And if we have it appear it's on the up and up, it might just be on the up and up, and we'll be a good team going forward. Like, that appearances can also mirror reality. So I think that's sort of where they are now, is like, get on the court, get that value back up, show that you're, one of the top guards like ever to play basketball, which is what he really is when he's firing all cylinders. And then we'll revisit a longer deal here in a little bit, or like, and that will be the case. Or worst case scenario, your value's back up and you'll get re-signed. You'll sign with someone else for the max contract at the end of the year. Like, we can all help each other, even if we don't like each other. I do think that's probably where they are with Kyrie here too, with the understanding, if it all goes right, the Nets will be awesome. That's the other thing here too. Like, if it all goes correct with the Nets, if it all plays out on paper like it could, this team could be amazing, especially on offense. And I think that's an easy selling point to sell to players too sometimes, is that, like, hey, come back, play your hardest. We have other good players here. If it all works, we'll be really good. If it doesn't work, you'll at least get your value back up a little bit, and we'll be able to trade you to a more advantageous situation. So we can all just help each other, even if the end goal is like not the championship down the line because it didn't go right. I think in that way, I think the Kyrie situation does kind of mirror the Durant situation.
I mean, how good can this Nets team be on paper? If they can get all these guys kind of bought in again together, how long does the at least tentative partnership and agreement with Kevin Durant last? Is it a temporary fixture, or is it something where KD truly is bought into trying to win a title in Brooklyn? You're gonna have us covered for all of that and more over at Locked On Nets. Doug, I appreciate you stopping by Locked On NBA with me.
Awesome, thanks a lot.
That's going to do it for our KD content on today's episode of Locked On Rockets. Coming up in segment 3, we're going to take a look at some of the news and notes from elsewhere around the NBA. We're going to get there in just one moment. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Now, final thing here on the KD front, which again, it feels, sometimes it feels weird to do, to focus so heavily on another organization on a Rockets podcast. But at the same time, when you hold that organization's draft picks for the next half decade in your hand, it does, it is very important to keep tabs on what's going on over there. I will say on the KD front, it does feel like, based on kind of the way that Doug Norrie kind of, highlighted things, it does kind of feel like that this situation could just be a holdover, right? Could just be, prolonging things, kind of extending things, realizing, okay, hey, nobody's winning here. This is a lose-lose situation on both sides. If we just work together for a little while, maybe we can come to terms on a better agreement somewhere in the middle part of the season, what have you. And so maybe this situation isn't being, completely rolled over to next offseason, but maybe it's something that we revisit around the trade deadline. And again, if the Rockets want to see the maximum potential of those Brooklyn picks, they want this thing to end as poorly as possible for the Nets. And so again, more discord, more uncertainty, more frustration, all of that is in the absolute best benefit of the Houston Rockets as far as this whole Brooklyn Nets situation is concerned. But let's take a look around the rest of the NBA. A couple little news and notes here. We'll start with the fact that Pat Beverley is now a member of the LA Lakers. The Lakers were able to successfully flip Talen Horton-Tucker and Stanley Johnson into Patrick Beverley, a holdover from the Rudy Gobert deal with the Utah Jazz. And now Pat Bev and Russell Westbrook are teammates, which is just absurd to think about given their absolutely contentious history. Obviously, Pat Bev injuring Russell Westbrook all those years ago, which I don't think Russell Westbrook has ever forgotten. Russell Westbrook saying that Pat Bev trick y'all, running around out there doing nothing. They're back and forth, they've had back and forths on social media, or at least Pat Bev, has taken some shots on social media. Like there's just a long, long history between those two guys. And so just the inner NBA reality TV fan in me wants to see Westbrook and Beverley actually have to coexist on the floor for a little while this season, because it would be just absolute peak comedic value to see what actually transpires with those two guys sharing the floor. There's even apparently some rumors, right, of the Lakers potentially John Walling Russell Westbrook this season, putting him on ice just so that he doesn't, so he's not detrimental to the franchise. I would hate to see that just because I want to see what those two actually look like on the floor together. I think Pat Bev can get past it, right? Pat Bev will be fine. He's like, whatever, this has been a rivalry, don't care. Russ is the one that I don't think is going to be able to get past it, right? Like, I think the situation is basically untenable if you're Russ, where he's harbored a lot of anger and frustration over the injury years ago, like just their back and forths. I don't expect Russ to be able to get along with Pat Bev. But watching that situation unfold in LA is just going to be absolute high comedy and must-see TV as the season progresses. Then on the flip side, we have a bit of disappointing news, and that is that Chet Holmgren suffered the foot injury during the crossover event, the Pro-Am event, playing with, LeBron, Tatum, Paolo Banchero, a bunch of other NBA players. And at first it looked like he might just miss, a month or two of the season. And then news came out, 24 hours later after the initial injury, or after the initial prognosis, I should say, that he's going to miss his entire rookie year. And first off, I feel for Chet Holmgren. I feel for Thunder fans. That absolutely sucks. You don't want to ever see anybody get injured. You don't ever want to see anybody, hurt themselves while playing this game. But it's one of the inherent risks of playing basketball, right? Anytime you step on a court, whether it's, a pickup game down at the park, whether it's in a gym, whether it's in practice, running drills, whatever, anytime you're, taking part in a physical activity, you have a chance to injure yourself. And so it's just really unfortunate that this happened to Chet during this Pro-Am event. I do hope it doesn't take away from these Pro-Am events, because they're really cool, and they're a great chance for people to catch some of these players in cities and places that, otherwise you wouldn't be able to see NBA, level talent kind of out and about just doing their thing. So I hope people don't try to paint, Pro-Am events in a negative light because of this injury, because it was just a freak, non-contact, whatever, type of injury. And the other thing is, while I think it's perfectly acceptable, and this is mainly why I wanted to bring this one up, while I think it's perfectly acceptable to look at Chet Holmgren's, I guess the concerns with Chet, right, coming out of the draft, whether his body would be able to hold up to the physicality of the NBA game, how his body would translate, right, as a basketball player at this level, all that. This injury wasn't like, a frame type injury. This was just a freak, accident foot injury. So I do think it's okay to take a look at the prior to the draft concerns about Chet and whether he'd hold up injury-wise. And I do think it's a warranted conversation to discuss how he will return from this injury, right? What will he look like after, recovering from this foot injury, which is the same thing. It's a Lisfranc foot injury. So it's the same thing that Gerald Green suffered with, that actually ended Gerald Green's career almost, effectively, at least as far as an NBA career is concerned. Wasn't able to make it back to the Rockets. Obviously, then Gerald Green, rehab, got better, came back as a coach with the Rockets, and then went down to the RGV Vipers and won a championship in the G League level. So that was really cool to see. But as far as this injury is concerned, right, how is Chet going to bounce back from this? How is he going to return from this injury? What I don't want to see, and what I don't think we should see from this news, is Rockets fans, or any other fans for that matter, Magic fans, whatever, Kings fans, any other fans at the top of the draft, running victory laps saying like, oh, yep, we told you, Chet, injury concerns, glad we didn't pick him, right? This is inspired by Chronicles' Brian Smith going on Twitter and basically saying that the Rockets pick at number 3 looks even better with Jabari Smith Jr. in the wake of this news surrounding Chet Holmgren. And I thought that was just, not great. Like, come on, man. You don't need to enjoy the fact that another player got injured or try to run victory laps around another player, having an injury and missing out on their entire rookie year just to prop up a player on the Rockets. It's just kind of, it's a crappy situation all around. It doesn't look great. And again, I've seen, a handful of Rockets fans who have, again, chimed in on this front and being like, yep, I didn't want Chet. This was one of the issues, right? And it's like, again, I don't think you can look at it through that lens because, again, this injury was a freak accident, could have happened to anybody. I do think there are some conversations that are warranted, to discuss about, what this looks like moving forward for Chet, all that good stuff. But trying to use it as a referendum on Chet and his ability to succeed at the NBA level, or where another player got picked in direct correlation to where Chet got taken, at number 2 overall for OKC, Rockets fans wiping their brow like, oh yeah, well, Jabari's not injured. Like that's just not cool behavior. I don't think it's, and I don't think it furthers any discussions. I don't think it brings anything positive to the table. And so those are my 2 cents on that set of news. As far as regarding Chet Holmgren, again, I do wish him the speediest of recoveries. And it's kind of a bummer, right? Because I was really looking forward to seeing Chet and Jabari kind of go at one another, across their rookie seasons. It's always fun to see the rookies of, the top of the class match up with one another. So it's going to be fun to watch, the Rockets play the Magic, to play the Kings, to play the Pistons, like all that stuff. And so now OKC is kind of out the window, at least as far as Chet is concerned. Yeah, they still got Josh Giddey, and it'll still be a fun matchup. But, won't be billed quite the same as it was when Chet was slated to be playing against his counterpart at the top of the draft in Jabari Smith Jr. Now, moving forward, for our very next episode, don't want to miss that. We're going to be talking about Alperen Sengun and Usman Garuba and their play in Eurobasket overseas. Alperen Sengun playing for Turkey, Usman Garuba playing for Spain. We'll take a look at their performances and kind of how they've stood out in their respective performances so far playing in Eurobasket. We may also dabble a little bit and try and take a look at whether or not the Rockets should entertain signing Colin Sexton, who is still unsigned by the Cleveland Cavaliers. So we'll take a look at that. Also, if you haven't done so yet, check out Rockets Watch. We're doing these Rockets Watches. We've been watching a lot of the overseas basketball play, a lot of the Eurobasket games, I should say. FIBA basketball is a ton of fun. It's really aggressive. The physicality is just completely next level compared to the NBA. Be sure to check those out. Follow at Rockets Watch on Twitter. We yell about it on there all the time. All that good stuff. Also, if you like this shirt, the Locksmith shirt, made by Dave Hardesty himself, Clutch Fans, one of the OGs of Rockets media. He's got a whole Clutch Fans shop online. I have a link to it in the episode description. If you go there, if you want to buy some merch, you can use LO Rockets 10 is the discount code. You'll get 10% off of anything in the shop. Go check it out. Go support him. This shirt is like one of my new favorite shirts. There's a bunch of great designs there. Go check them out. Link in the description. But as always, thank you so much for checking out the show. If you haven't done so yet, please consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcast. That's Apple, Spotify, Google, the Odyssey app, free and available on all platforms. We're also on YouTube. So go to YouTube, search Locked on Rockets. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Remember, for the house, for the team, for the algorithm. Go comment on the YouTube videos. They help out a ton. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And we look forward to having you back right here at Locked on Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.